Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Smart Tea Podcast, where we talk about the lives of scientists and innovators who shape the world. I'm Adpita.
And I'm Aarati.
And we're so excited to talk to you this week.
Yeah, how are you, Arpita?
I'm doing really well. I feel like I've had a very cozy week with, again, the very bad weather that we're having.
Wait, you muted yourself somehow. Yeah.
Now,
you're back.
I did not mean to do that. I was going to say, as an aside, I am getting a new computer.
Oh, okay, great.
This one is really old.
What kind of computer do you have?
It's just a MacBook Pro, but it's old, like 2016 old.
Oh, wow. That is old for a MacBook. That's getting on. Yeah, that's getting on.
It doesn't like it when I open multiple things at a time, and I am getting a new computer, so I can do this without worrying about, like right now, you can't hear it, but my fans are running.
Oh my God.
It's like, you have video, you have the internet.
What are you doing? You're killing me.
Yeah. What about you?
Yeah, I've been having a good week too, except for a couple days ago, the power went out at our house, and it wasn't just my house, it was like half the city. And it was super random because even though the weather has been sort of dreary, it hasn't been that bad the past week. But yeah, the power went out for like 3 or 4 hours one night, and completely random. We had no heads up at all, but it did give me a chance to light my candle that I have, and it just has like the most magnificent scent.
What's the candle?
So I went to Hawaii for my best friend's wedding in like 2016, and we went to this random boutique to kill time, and we were just playing around with the like perfumes and like the things that they have at the boutique that are just all so expensive, and I had absolutely no intention of buying anything. But then I sprayed this perfume, and I was just like, oh my God, this is my scent. This is it. I love this. What is this? And I totally fell in love, and I told my friend about it. I was like, what do I do? Like, I'm in love with this scent, but it's like so outrageously expensive. But she was like, you need to buy it.
I mean, you got to get it.
You've never had this reaction to anything in your life. So you need to just buy it. And I bought it. And then
that was the correct decision. I support that.
Thank you. And thank you to my friend who enables me. But yeah, I bought the scent, and then a couple years later, I was like, I wonder who makes that scent. Like it took me like 3 years literally to look up the company. And it's this small woman-owned boutique in Brooklyn, and they make all sorts of scents that are just magical. They're just so amazing. They have sandalwood and jasmine, and
so I wish everyone could see Aarti's face right now, because she is so excited talking about these scents.
I never thought I would be so like emotionally happy over my sense of smell, but it's just. But you know what, though? I did work in an olfactory lab for my PhD where we were not allowed to wear any scented lotions or soaps. And so I feel like that...
Maybe you were stunted, you were just deprived. So. And then maybe...
I think that's what it was.
I wonder, because like olfaction is so tied to memory, I wonder if there's something, from your childhood or something where there was a scent that now it just like has been triggered by this perfume, which is making you have such a strong emotional connection to it.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
I don't know. I'm just making stuff up.
I definitely had like some sort of spiritual awakening. Then, of course, I bought a bunch more of their perfumes, and I also bought some candles from them. So when the power went out, which is where this all started.
Oh yeah, I forgot about your power outage.
Yeah. It gave me the perfect excuse to light this candle and make my whole room smell just absolutely wonderful. And everyone's like moaning about the power being out, and I'm just sitting in my little dark tropical paradise.
I'm imagining your closet just being like a stockpile of all these candles. She's just
It pretty much is. Like,
this company in Brooklyn is single-handedly in business because of Aarati right now.
if anyone's interested, the name is Tanais. I think that's how you say it. Tanais.
This is amazing publicity for them. Tanais, we're willing to do sponsored content for you.
Yeah, from a tiny little science podcast.
If you're out there and you're
I
listening.
love it. Yeah, it's my little thing, though.
I loved that. That was a great story. I'm really excited to get into our story, though. So who are we talking about today?
So today, I am going to tell you the story of Alice Ball. We're keeping in our theme of Black History Month and women of color scientists.
I love the girls.
Yeah, have you heard of Alice Ball?
I haven't heard of Alice Ball.
Okay, she actually is sort of famous now, but wasn't like that for a while. So Alice Ball was a young chemist, and she actually did a lot of her work in Hawaii. So there is kind of a little crossover there with my story and this story, which was completely unintentional, but let's get into the episode. So Alice Augusta Ball was born in Seattle, Washington on July 24th, 1892. She and her siblings were born into a middle-class family. Interestingly, although Alice is a Black woman scientist, on her birth certificate, both her parents are listed as white.
Oh.
Yeah, but on her parents' marriage certificate and U.S. Census surveys, they are both listed as Black. So in a quote for the New York Times, a professor of American history, Quintard Taylor, said, "This may have less to do with phenotype and more to do with what the Balls thought about themselves culturally."
Interesting.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I wonder if it was like a strategic move to maybe give her more opportunity or something.
I think it was.
Also, I did not know you listed race on birth certificates. And on marriage licenses.
I don't know. I didn't think about that. Yeah. I don't know if we still do that, or I don't know if that was a thing at the time. I don't know. But yeah, it is very interesting. But you're right. It does sound like they were very much aware of how the world worked.
Right.
And they most likely fudged Alice's birth certificate because they hoped it would help her escape a little bit from the racism and prejudice in society. And maybe even like open up some opportunities for her in the era where separate but equal has just been established. So,
yeah, no, I was just going to say this is on a much, much smaller scale, but it reminds me of, those social studies that happen that say if you have a ethnic sounding name on a resume, there's like, there's like implicit bias that people have, like recruiters have when they're looking at your resume. Yeah. And so if you have a name that's more white sounding, like Joe Smith or something, even if you aren't actually white, there's less of an implicit bias just by reading your name. So I wonder if it was something like that. If she's visually looks Black, like a Black woman, but on paper maybe is white.
Yeah, like Alice Ball could be
right,
Black
Alice
or
Ball
white.
could be, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and especially like back to your point about how I don't know if race is even a thing on birth certificates anymore. Like I don't know if you had to put your race down to like apply for jobs.
Right.
Yeah, but even though they did list her as white on her birth certificate, her parents, Laura Louise Ball and James Presley Ball, were both prominent members of the African American community and strong advocates for their community rights. So Alice's father, James, was a lawyer and an editor for a newspaper called The Colored Citizen. He was also a photographer, which is a skill that he picked up from his father, James Ball Sr., so that's Alice's grandfather. And James Ball Sr. was actually a famous photographer. He was the first Black person to use a daguerreotype, which is a type of way to print photographs on metal plates. So super early photography.
Like it's on a piece of metal, like you transfer the image onto a piece of metal. I don't even know how to picture that.
Yeah, so I had to watch a video to understand how they did this. But basically, you have a polished copper plate that's coated in silver, And then you cover that in a solution of iodine and bromide, which makes the silver light sensitive. So then when you put that plate into the camera and open the shutter, an image of whatever the camera is pointed at gets imprinted onto the plate.
Oh, so you kind of have like a really old-timey Polaroid, because then you take the plate out and there is a imprint of the image.
Yes, but then you still have to develop.
Oh, you still have to develop it.
Yeah, so then you have to develop and fix the image using mercury fumes, a salt called sodium thiosulfate, and gold chloride to bring out the different tones and give the image more contrast. So there's like a step-by-step video of this on the Victoria and Albert Museum YouTube channel that like takes you through all the steps if you're interested.
Sounds toxic.
Yes. It is a very involved process. A lot of chemical reactions going on, but Alice grew up surrounded by that because her grandfather did that and then her father did that. So the photography and the chemicals they were using were fascinating to her, and so she naturally developed an interest in chemistry because of this. So in 1903, when Alice was 10 years old, her grandfather was suffering from arthritis. So the family decided to move to Hawaii, hoping that the warmer weather would help. Unfortunately, though, after a short while, he passed away. So within a few years, the family moved back to Seattle. Alice went to Seattle High School and excelled in science courses, which was pretty rare for a woman at a time, let alone a woman of color.
Yeah.
She had a very outgoing, witty, and ambitious personality. She was in the high school drama club. And when she graduated in 1910, her high school yearbook quote was, "I work, and still it seems I have nothing done."
That's relatable as hell.
I know, right? I was just like, same.
Same,
just
girl,
spinning my
same.
wheels. Yeah. Especially in science. It seems like you work so hard, and then after all of that, you have one data point. Great. Now I just need 100 more.
This was her high school quote?
Yes.
Poor thing. My lord. She needs
her high school yearbook quote, too.
God.
Yeah.
She needs like a nap and a vacation.
I know. But very, very ambitious personality already, you can tell. So after high school, Alice went to the University of Washington, where she earned 2 bachelors of science degrees, one in pharmaceutical chemistry and one in pharmacy. While she was here, she also co-published her first paper along with one of her pharmacy instructors, William Den, called Benzoylations in Ether Solution in the Journal of the American Chemical Society.
What?
Yeah.
Like,
I know. So, like, she's doing her BS. She's doing 2 BSs, 2 bachelors of science, and published her first paper in a very prestigious journal, by the way. JACS is still
it's
like a
huge
really
journal.
good journal
it's
to
a really
publish
good
in.
journal.
Yeah, and again, like early 1900s. So this is an amazing achievement for a woman, let alone a Black woman. So,
and also pause. She's going to college. She's a Black
Yes.
woman, and she's going to college in what 1910 we're at right now. Like
Yeah.
that is a huge accomplishment. Just the fact that she's going.
and be studying science. Yeah.
I'm just blown away by all these people who are publishing papers so young. I did not publish my first paper until grad school.
I know. Yeah. I mean, on the one hand, it's like these people are truly amazing. On
It's
the other
true.
hand, there is something to be said about like how complicated the world has got. Like I'm not a chemist. So I asked my brother, who is a chemist, what the heck benzoylations and ether solutions are. Like, what does that mean? What is this thing that she's published?
Yeah, good question.
And he was basically like, it's basically just another toolkit in the chemistry toolbox. So we couldn't really come up with many concrete examples of what you would use this reaction in. But it's like, if you ever wanted to know what a benzene chemical how it would react in an ether solution, now you know, because Alice Ball did that.
I see.
But where do people use that reaction? Or like, I don't know, maybe someone in the audience has a better idea, but You could not get that published today, I don't think. Like you would have to,
Yeah,
or
like the
it's,
standard for publication is so much higher. Not that it's
yeah.
like necessarily the science, but like even to get a paper in a really high journal, it's like multiple years of experiments that you have now put in with like many different figures that is not quite so simple.
Yeah. And you have to show like some impact,
Right.
like I feel like you have to show like how this could be used or what the use is of this, potentially even.
Yeah, like maybe what we would think of as an abstract today.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, we're just making ourselves feel better, really, is what we're
Yeah.
doing. We're just
Yeah.
self-soothing.
We're still smart. Yeah. We really are. That's all this is. You're right.
It's just like a big ego boost. That really started this podcast as just an ego boost.
Yeah, exactly. Um Anyway, that opened the doors for her quite a bit after she graduated. Numerous universities, including UC Berkeley, offered her scholarships to continue her higher education, but ultimately she decided to go back to Hawaii. She accepted an offer from the College of Hawaii, which is today the University of Hawaii, to study for her master's degree in chemistry. Alice's master's thesis was on extracting one of the active ingredients in the kava or awa root, which is a plant that is native to the Pacific Islands. It's been used as an herbal remedy, and people would drink it in ceremonies and social gatherings because it helped reduce anxiety and stress. So people would dry out the root, grind it into a powder, and drink it as a tea.
Is it like a intoxicant?
So, yeah. So, actually, that's funny because the Latin name for the kava plant is called Piper methysticum, which literally translates to intoxicating pepper.
Huh.
So, the active ingredients in the kava root that Alice found a way to extract are called kavalacetones. And these are chemicals that work on your brain, kind of like alcohol, to make you feel happy and relaxed. In her thesis paper, Alice writes, kava is at first stimulating, but the effects of an excess resembles that of opium, producing
Oh,
a drowsy drunkenness lasting for 2 hours.
how would one acquire kava in this day and age?
In this day and age, it sounds like you can just get it as a pill, but Alice found a way to extract what actually, like the actual chemical that worked on your brain.
Mm-hmm.
And she was able to like figure out what that was, isolate it, extract it, and then show that it produced the same drowsy, happy effects. Like I think she did some animal studies to show that when she injected animals with it, they kind of got happy and drunk a little
Yeah,
bit.
that's so interesting. I've never heard of this before. There's, I'm sure you've seen like this interesting wave of people who aren't really drinking anymore,
Oh
and
yeah.
there's all these like alternatives to alcohol. There's these like CBD drinks, and every time I go to Whole Foods, I feel like there's like this whole new section. And my partner and I like aren't big drinkers, but now there's all these liquor alternatives that are
Oh.
like a whiskey replacement and a tequila replacement. And so then if you want a fun drink but you aren't really drinking,
Mhm.
you can have one of these instead. And I feel like the holy grail is the something that gets you the effects of alcohol without the hangover, without all of the negative effects of
Yeah.
alcohol. Because, like, people do want a social lubricant, myself included. Like, you go to a
Yes.
party and you just want something to kind of take the edge off a little bit when you're in a social situation. So
Yeah.
I'm so intrigued by this because it seems like
Yeah.
the perfect mix of, making you feel happy and relaxed, but maybe without the negative effects of alcohol.
Yeah. So I actually didn't look into like how you would get it today.
Yeah, I'm like, how
But it
do I
sounds
get this?
like but I think you can because it's just a root, that people were drinking as a tea. That's pretty herbal. Like
Yes.
it's,
Yeah, yeah. It's like a
so I I think you should be able to buy it probably, but
Okay, BRB, adding to my Amazon cart.
yeah, it'd be interesting to have it and then see if it actually does make you a little bit happy and relaxed.
There's going to
And
be a mysterious shipment of pills arriving at my house.
yeah, kava root pills. What are these? Don't worry about it. Okay, so in 1915, Alice Ball graduates with her master's degree in chemistry, making her the university's first Black and first female graduate.
Love that.
And then the university actually hires her as an instructor in their chemistry department, again, making her the first Black woman instructor at the universities. So
That's amazing.
she just blasted through all those ceilings. She's 23, by the way, now.
It's amazing.
I know. So now we're going to pause on Alice's life for a minute and we're going to switch tracks so we can build a little bit of context for what was happening on the islands of Hawaii at the time that Alice started teaching there. So back then, Hawaii wasn't a state yet. It was still the Kingdom of Hawaii. If we go even further back to the 1830s, a disease called leprosy, which is also known as Hansen's disease, was just starting to spread through the Hawaiian Islands population. So people may have heard of this because it's pretty famous, the leprosy epidemic on Hawaii.
Mm-hmm.
But leprosy at the time had a lot of social stigma attached to it. It was spread by a slow-growing bacteria called Mycobacterium leprae through prolonged direct person-to-person contact. And because of this, it took a really long time for people to understand how it was being transmitted because it could take months or even years for symptoms to appear. And so for a long time, it kind of seemed to just pop up at random because when a person got sick, they couldn't clearly trace it back to who they had caught it from.
Yeah.
So it's not like, oh yeah, I was just hanging out with that person who coughed and now I'm coughing. So obviously I got it from them. It wasn't like that.
And like prolonged also seems like a little vague in this situation. So it's like how long is enough and how short is short enough that you don't get it. Yeah, I could see how that could be confusing.
Exactly. And so people thought that if you caught it, it was a punishment directly from God and that you were unclean or impure in some way and God was punishing you for that. And then add to that, that leprosy patient suffered from severe skin, eye, and nerve damage and could become permanently disfigured and parts of their body could get paralyzed. So it was kind of disturbing or scary to look at a person suffering with leprosy. Yeah. And that just added to the social stigma of it. So this disease is spreading throughout the native Hawaiian population like crazy. To try and put a stop to the spread, in 1866, the Hawaiian government passed a law that quarantined people suffering with leprosy on the island of Molokai on a peninsula called Kalaupapa that was isolated by 2,000-foot high cliffs and surrounded by ocean.
Oh, so like they really just stuck them there.
Yeah, so anyone showing signs of leprosy, or in some cases anyone even suspected of having it, were arrested by law enforcement and essentially exiled to this peninsula. They were torn away from their homes, their jobs, family, and friends. And in some cases, their family even disowned them so that they wouldn't be suspected as having caught the disease by associating with the person that was being exiled.
Yikes.
Yeah, so very traumatizing. And then when you were shipped to the island or this peninsula, there was really nothing there in terms of guaranteed housing or food or treatment for the disease. No one was there to take care of you. You didn't really have anything to do once you got there. So basically, it's just this one-way ticket to this peninsula where there's nothing to do and no one to take care of you. There's no cure. And you were just kind of put there out of sight, out of mind until you died. So very, very depressing.
Damn, that is rough.
Yeah.
This is like how Australia got started, you know, wasn't it prisoners?
Yeah.
From the UK, they just like dumped them there and they were like, okay, good luck, bye.
Just out of sight, out of mind. Yeah, we're not dealing with you. So by the time Alice started her job as an instructor in 1915, there were over 1,100 people living in the settlement. At this time, there were also a few facilities around Hawaii where people were working on trying to find a cure for leprosy. And one of these people was Harry T. Holman, who was working as an assistant surgeon at the Kalihi Hospital on the island of Oahu. He had received funding to treat patients at Kalaupapa. He had been trying to treat his patients using chalmurga oil, which is derived from the seeds of the chalmurga tree. It had been somewhat successfully used in Indian and Chinese medicine to treat leprosy, but it was very tricky to administer to patients.
It's like a supplement, or how did they?
So it's this oil, but it's very sticky and viscous. So it was too sticky to be spread topically on the skin.
Uh-huh.
It tasted really bitter and disgusting. And so if a patient tried to swallow it, a lot of times they would end up just throwing it up.
Oh no. Oh, no.
Yeah. Or if they could keep it down, they felt so nauseous that they probably wouldn't want to take the treatment again. So they wouldn't stick to the treatment long term, which is what you need to do for a bacterial infection like leprosy.
Right.
So then doctors tried injecting it, but again, it's an oil, so it's not water soluble. Oil and water don't mix. So it wouldn't enter the bloodstream easily.
Right.
Instead, it would just kind of sit under the skin at the injection point, forming a painful blister.
So gross, Aarti.
Yeah, it's very painful, and it would, quote, burn like fire under the skin rather than being absorbed.
Jesus Christ.
So
this is not ideal. None of this is good.
yeah, but the problem is, like, Harry Holman was struggling with this because chalmurga oil had shown to be an effective treatment if it could be somehow administered. Like, in the few patients that were either able to keep it down or, you know, it did somehow enter the bloodstream a little bit or something, it was actually treating the leprosy. It was actually working.
So we have a route of administration issue here.
Exactly. He just couldn't figure out how to administer it to patients in a way that was easy and effective. But then he happened to read Alice's master thesis on the extractions of cavalacetones from the kava root. So he saw the potential of her work and reached out to her and asked if she would be willing to take on the challenge of extracting the active ingredients in chalmurga oil so that it could be made into a solution that could be injected into patients.
Mm-hmm. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I want to mention that this is not something that just Harry had been struggling with. Like, physicians around the world had been trying to use chalmurga oil with the same problems, and chemists had been trying to find a way to make the oil water soluble and failing. So people all around the world were struggling with this.
Yeah, that seems like more complicated, right? Because if I think about a root, it is probably more water-based. It's like part of a plant. So even if it's producing an oil, like I imagine that the active compound in a root is probably water soluble, which makes it a little bit easier to extract. I'm also not a chemist, but I'm trying to think about that, and it's like an oil seems much harder and much more complicated.
Yes.
And
it is. You're exactly thinking about it, right?
I'm even thinking of, like, I took all the gen chem and all the organic chemistry in undergrad, which was now a long time ago, but I can't even think of oil-based or fat-based solutions that we worked in. Like, everything was water-based or alcohol-based that we did.
Yeah.
And like, I don't even know that was something that we covered, even in organic compounds. So this is really interesting. I can't think of another template or like analogous problem that I've encountered before.
Yeah, it's a tough problem for sure. And the way you're thinking about it is exactly right. Like, it's very hard to get an oil and water to mix. Like, it's not really possible. And you have to do it in a way such that you don't lose the therapeutic qualities of the oil. Like, you can get the chemical out, you can change it up all you want, but then does it still treat the leprosy or the bacteria that you're trying to, like, so you can't change it too much, but you have to change it just enough. So Alice agreed to take up this challenge. So while she taught classes during the day, she worked on the chalmurga oil problem during her spare time.
What a spare time.
Yeah. So any bets on how long it took her to figure this out?
Realistically, I would say like many years, but given that we're talking about these brilliant scientists, like 6 months.
Yeah, it took her less than a year to figure out how to
Of
do it.
course.
Yeah.
It's like, this is back to our other little snarky comment about just like all these people struggling for your, just get a girl to do it. Like, she'll do it in less than
Yeah.
a year
In her spare
in
time.
her spare
Yeah.
time. She's like, oh,
Yeah.
this was a side project for me. I'm going to solve the world's problems.
Yeah. Just a hobby. Something that chemists and physicians have
Yeah.
been struggling with.
I'll cure leprosy as a hobby.
Yeah. So she was able to isolate the two active compounds in chalmurga oil, which are chalmurgic acid and hydrocarpic acid. Okay, so I'm going to simplify the chemistry a lot here.
Great.
But basically, these active compounds she extracted fall into a category called fatty acids. So if you look at the molecular structure of these compounds, they're both long chains of carbon and hydrogen atoms that are not soluble in water. So Alice was able to modify and react these fatty acids with ethanol. And in both cases, she transformed them from fatty acids into ethyl esters. So they are now soluble in water, but because she didn't change them too much, they still retained their therapeutic properties.
Is this chemistry lesson Aarati's brother approved?
Yes, it is. I talked to him a lot about this, actually. I was like, what is happening? How is she able to do this? And to be fair, a lot of it went over my head. It sounded like the main thing I needed to know was that she transformed them from one category of molecules called fatty acids into another category called ethyl esters. And these ethyl ester compounds that she created were now water soluble. The ethyl ester compound worked like a bactericide, killing the mycobacterium that caused leprosy. And now the active compounds of chalmurga oil could be injected safely into patients with minimal side effects. And again, this is something no other chemist in the world had been able to work out.
So they're still injecting it. It's not oral. They're just injecting it and then it's systemic?
Yeah. So now that it's water soluble, it's able to be absorbed into the bloodstream a lot easier. It wouldn't sit under the skin and form a blister anymore. So it would just be a nice little injection that would just go into your bloodstream now. So it wasn't a complete cure, but throughout the 1920s and 30s, it became the only truly effective treatment available for leprosy. It was as close to a cure as anyone had gotten until in the 1940s an antibiotic was developed. And in many cases, it did actually help patients to fight off the disease completely. In Hawaii, one physician reported that 78 patients had been discharged from Kalihi Hospital and were able to completely avoid being exiled.
Wow, that's huge.
Yeah. So they received the treatment and then they were able to go back to their lives. And soon the people who had been exiled and underwent the treatment were also able to be cured and leave the colony and go back to their families and lives.
Oh, yeah. No more island for them.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, hey, we actually have a treatment now.
You can come back.
That might work. You can come back. Exactly. So stories like this were happening all over the world. Unfortunately, though, Alice never got to see any of this because before she could even publish her work, she fell sick. She returned home to Seattle and was treated for a few months, but sadly, on December 31st, 1916, she passed away.
She was so young.
She was only 24.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
What was her illness?
The cause of her death is up to some debate. Her death certificate officially cites tuberculosis, but apparently there was some evidence that it had been altered. Like, that wasn't what was written originally. And we don't know what was written originally or why it was altered or who altered it. Like, we don't know.
Oh, shady.
Yeah. There are many other articles and sources that suggest she actually died from inhaling chlorine gas while she was demonstrating how to properly wear a chlorine gas mask. Because we're in the middle of World War I, so chlorine gas was being used as a chemical weapon. So it's plausible that she was, demonstrating how to wear a gas mask and accidentally inhaled chlorine. Also, at this time, ventilation hoods were not mandatory in the university's labs. So
Yeah, a lot of toxins. I don't know, maybe are we gonna pivot and this is gonna become a murder mystery podcast? Because it sounds kind of
I
along
mean,
that line.
I have some thoughts because here's where the story gets really dramatic, actually. So allow me to introduce two new sinister characters into this episode, Arthur Dean and Richard Renshaw. So both of them were also chemists at the University of Hawaii. Arthur Dean, in particular, had been Alice's graduate study advisor and president of the university. So he naturally knew all about Alice's work. And when she died, he took over her project. He did a few more trials, made some minor tweaks to the process, and then Dean and Renshaw published it in 1920 in the Journal of the American Chemical Society without giving Alice any credit for her work.
Typical.
Yeah, they didn't list her as a contributor. They did not mention her at all. And they even called the process the Dean method after Arthur Dean.
Stop. That's so annoying. Wait, this is the leprosy thing that they published.
Yes.
That she figured out, but they have now passed it off as their own work.
Yeah.
And she's also died mysteriously.
Exactly. So I was like, can I just like put on a conspiracy theory hat for a moment here?
Yeah. Have you read Yellowface?
No, I haven't.
Okay, this is not a spoiler for any audience member, but there's this book that I read very recently. I will look up the author. It's R.F. Wong, I think. And the premise of the story is there's this author, and she has a best friend who is Asian American. The author is white. They're both authors. The friend writes this bestseller book. The main character in the story is very jealous. The friend mysteriously dies, leaving behind an unpublished manuscript, which the main character passes off as her own. And I'm like, some parallels here, maybe?
Yeah, it does sound like eerily similar.
And that was a fiction story that I just read. This is real life.
This is real life, yeah. And it did make me wonder, like, I'm not going to go so far as to saying, like, Arthur Dean killed Alice Ball or anything. Like, but it did give me pause. It did make me wonder if even, like, if the university was even somehow indirectly responsible for changing Alice's death records, because if it was true that she died from inhaling chlorine gas in the chemistry labs at the university, and the same university is now saying we have a treatment for leprosy, that might open some questions as to like how safe the labs are, and like, you know, it just kind of puts a black spot on the university's reputation. And I don't know, I kind of wondered if like maybe they were just like, if we just say it was tragic, she died from tuberculosis, and it has nothing to do with the safety of our labs or anything, then
yeah, it's like a cover your ass kind of moment.
Yeah, so I just kind of had I had no evidence for this at all.
Your detective work didn't yield any results, Aarti.
No, it didn't, unfortunately. I was just like, wait a minute. But everyone is just very tight-lipped about it. They're just like, it says she died from tuberculosis on her death records, but there's evidence that it changed.
This feels like it's like primed for a late night, you know, murder mystery tell-all that I would like you watch on a Friday night, you know?
Yeah, it's very dramatic.
The untold story of Alex Ball.
Yeah, exactly. So throughout the 1920s and 30s, demand for the treatment was just going through the roof. Arthur Dean started mass producing the treatment and was shipping it everywhere around the world, and people were praising him for being the one to help so many people, when really he's just capitalizing on this discovery that Alice made. The only other person who knew the truth about what had really happened was Harry Holman, the physician who had reached out to Alice to help him. So he tried to set the record straight by publishing a paper called The Fatty Acids of Chalmurga Oil in the Treatment of Leprosy and Other Diseases in the Journal Archives of Dermatology in 1922. In the paper, he gave Alice full credit for her discovery and coined the term the Ball method. He compared the Ball method with the Dean method, but Harry wrote, "I cannot see that there is any improvement whatsoever over the original technique as worked out by Miss Ball. The original method will allow any physician in any asylum for lepers in the world with little study to isolate and use the ethyl esters of Chalmurga fatty acids in treating his cases, while the complicated distillation in vacuo will require very delicate and not always obtainable apparatus.
So he's really trying to help her out here. Or I guess not help her out, but he's the good guy.
Yeah, he really was trying to give her full credit. He said, I think I read somewhere also, like he said he did have this problem. He reached out to Alice and she solved it for him.
So then how did people react? Were people accepting of this? Did people read this?
Not really. Well, it doesn't sound like it got much attention. People were just giving Arthur Dean all the credit for doing everything.
Seems like too little, too late.
Yeah. So she never really got credit for her work. And for decades, her remarkable achievement and contribution to science went unnoticed. Until about 50 years later, in the 1970s, a professor at the University of Hawaii, Catherine Takara, who taught African American and African studies, came across Alice Ball's work in the university archives while she was studying about Black women in Hawaii. And around the same time, a retired federal worker, Stanley Ali, was doing research on Black people in Hawaii and came across Alice Ball's records. So Takara and Ali pieced together Alice Ball's history, and they're really the reason that we know about her story at all today, like the work that they did.
Yeah, because it kind of got buried. Like this became such a huge thing, and
Yeah,
we're back to the white man who is
exactly.
making this a really huge thing. So it makes really perfect sense that they had to piece it together because it was probably like, not entirely, because she didn't get a chance to publish, right? Because
Yeah,
Harry published it posthumously, so they had to like figure out with her notes and like what did she discover.
yeah, that's what it sounds like to me. Like they found Harry's paper from 1922 where he gave Alice credit, and then maybe they found her notes or something. But they really were the ones who put together her history, and that's why we even know about her. Otherwise, she would have just been completely lost. So on February 29th in 2000, the University of Hawaii finally offered Alice Ball by placing a plaque by the only Chalmurga tree on campus.
Oh.
And the former Lieutenant Governor of Hawaii, Mazie Hirono, declared February 29th to be Alice Ball Day. In 2022, the governor of Hawaii changed that to February 28th.
Oh, so that we don't celebrate it once every 4 years?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was hoping. I was
like, interesting choice that she put it on the one day that doesn't happen every year,
Yeah.
but okay.
But that is actually a big part of why I wanted to do this story now, because it is a leap year. So
It is a leap year, yeah.
we're going to get,
Very timely.
yes, we're going to get the
We're going to
28th
get
and the
actual
29th.
Alice Ball Day. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I say we should just celebrate her on both days. Why not?
Yeah, 2 Alice Ball
Yeah,
Days.
she deserves it after being overlooked for 50 years. Yeah.
Should we buy some kava root pills and celebrate
Oh my
on
God.
different days?
Let's, yeah. Oh my gosh, yes. We should do that. See, and just as a tribute to her. It's purely as a tribute to her. Yeah.
We're gonna have drunken effects of the mind. What does she say?
Yeah.
It's for science and Black History Month, so
Yeah.
can't fight us on that.
Exactly. In 2007, the University Board of Regents gave Alice a Medal of Distinction, which is the highest honor they can give. The University of Hawaii Foundation also started the Alice Augusta Ball Scholarship for students pursuing a degree in chemistry, biology, or microbiology. And in 2020, a short film called The Ball Method was made by director Dagmawi Abebe. Recently, there's also been a push from the student government at the University of Hawaii to rename the Earth Sciences building from Dean Hall to Alice Ball Hall. So I fully support that.
That seems like it should happen. That seems
Yes.
like a no-brainer.
Yes. So good luck with that. I fully support that effort. But yeah, that's the story of Alice Ball. I mean, so many of the articles that I read also mentioned like what a shame it was that she died so young, because she accomplished all of this by the time she was 24. And so,
Yeah.
I mean,
It's like, because she really had like only a few short years where she was, able to make all these scientific discoveries. So, I mean, who knows what she would have accomplished if she had been alive for longer.
I don't know. Maybe this episode would be like 3 times longer than it is. So,
but I maintain that there's something to be found here. Like,
yes.
I don't know what can really be done, but I maintain that there's an interesting story to be discovered here.
Yeah, I think there could still be some there's still some unanswered questions here. I don't know if we'll ever find the answers to them, but we lost a very bright mind at a very young age,
Definitely.
which is always tragic, but
Yeah.
so glad that she finally got the accolades that she deserved. So, yeah.
Definitely. I feel like there's been more of this in the media, and I really am enjoying it. Like, I do think, in any case, I think everyone would agree that credit should be given where it's due. And I like these sort of redemption stories of, it's like, no, but actually is kind of how I'm reading the story.
Yeah.
And I really love that. Even if it's happening like posthumously and like she's not able to see this, I do think there's, like correcting the universe's energy, which I really appreciate,
Yes.
which is really cool. And I feel like there's been more of that in the media, and I'm fully here for it.
Yeah, definitely. It's very important.
Great story, Aarati. I really like that.
Thank you. And thank you all for listening.
Thanks for listening. If you have a suggestion for a story we should cover or thoughts you want to share about an episode, reach out to us at smartteapodcast.com. You can follow us on Instagram, at Twitter, at smartteapodcast, and listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get podcasts.